A happy stoned morning, noon, or night, depending on what time you're listening to this podcast, Toasters and Moshers. I'm Charles, and this is Riffs and Spliffs. Rolled up into this week's episode for you guys today is going to be a little bit of the sweet and race strain Maui Wowie. And then on the music appreciation spectrum, we're going to be delving into the greats, Horse the Band. As we start first and foremost with our cannabis education section, we're going to break apart a nug of some Maui Wowie. Now, before I went into research for this, when I had originally decided I was going to do Maui Wowie, I expected to find a ton of information or a huge origin or a huge backstory about this strain. And let me tell you guys, it was quite a bit underwhelming. Don't get too excited. I'm sorry, guys, if you all out there are familiar with Maui Wowie, have had it, have at least heard about it, thought the same thing. Well, guess again.
He's not in my thoughts.
Well, think again!
What I can tell you, though, is that Maui Wowie's strain history goes as far back as the 60s. It was first bred and cultivated as a Landrace strain in Hawaii. And in my research, I found a very interesting article that I actually want to share with you guys, so I'm going to pull this up for you and read what I had found in it. I'm just going to spot read for you guys. I'm not going to give you the whole article, so just kind of grabbing little paragraphs here and there. First, there was a tiny section where it says, "The real story of how the name Maui Wowie came about is a glorious story of peace and love, a meeting of two worlds, tale of two tribes to say, when the counterculture hippies made peace with Kanaka Mola, Moili? Man, it's native Hawaiian, so I apologize, guys. I butchered that shit, but you get the picture. Essentially, in the 60s, there was still lots of animosity, I guess, between the Hawaiian people and the hippies. The Hawaiian kingdom had recently been overthrown, and many of the natives there were distrustful of these new waves of hippies and people they were bringing with them and the stuff they were bringing with them to their culture, and they just weren't overall too thrilled. Apparently, the summer solstice came, and with that, some of the native Hawaiians started noticing clouds of smoke and the smell of, I guess, what they name cannabis as back then, pakalolo. And yeah, these hippies were playing loud music and they were dancing, and I guess the Hawaiians ended up showing up kind of pissed off. Upon finding these hippies reveling in the greatness that was cannabis, turns out these Hawaiians, even though they were looking all pissed and whatnot, they had different plans. Essentially, they busted out their own pakalolo and they started rolling fat-ass doobies.
Out here in Amish, smoking big doinks in Amish.
And one of the name strains that were dropped as far as what the hippies had brought with them over to Hawaii, they actually brought over some Acapulco Gold. Great one, if you remember that from our very first official episode of the podcast, guys, going way back. Upon the hippies trying the weed that the Hawaiians had rolled up for them, hippies asked them, what is this stuff called? And the Hawaiians told them they called it Nahiku Maui. And apparently all the hippies could say when smoking the strain was, wow, wowie, dude, wow.
Talk it out, man. Kind of grabs you by the boo-boo, don't it?
So I guess they just took that Maui Wowie and people started screaming, Maui Wowie, Maui Wowie, this shit's incredible. And there you go. They came in peace and harmony and got together, and weed cured all. Now that we have that little bit of history out of the way, going back to cultivators, for my local cultivator, this was from a brand called Grassroots, and I believe if I could think about this hard enough, this is the first time I've featured a strain by Grassroots, just because I don't get Grassroots too often. They're usually on the higher side of pricing, but when I could find pretty good deals for eighths, I tend to scoop them up because Grassroots actually has pretty good products. And this is a straight sativa, baby.
And these babies just saved this lame-ass party! Wubba-dubba-dub-dub!
When looking at terpene profile, the most common terpenes we could see coming out of Maui Wowie is going to be myrcene, which is that earthy and musky scent. And then we have pinene coming in second. And then we have caryophyllene coming in last with that peppery scent, a little harsher. While looking for an average THC range on this guy, I actually come to find that that is undetermined. I saw one site had said straight just 19%. Otherwise, there wasn't much, and at that point, I don't really bank on that, considering that's not what mine was. Looking at my stash of Maui Wowie, I got THCA coming in at 21.55%, and then I see THC itself at 0.38%, so a little over 1/4%, maybe nothing too bad. Closer to 0.5% maybe. And surprise, surprise, no CBD. Looking at most common and notable flavors and scents you can expect from Maui Wowie, you can expect a little musky. I would say more so cheese accented when just smelling it straight from the case itself, the flower. Even when it's grinded up with a slight fruity on it, you can smell that like sweet coming in. Definitely you also have an overall earthy tone to this one. What to expect as far as common effects with Maui Wowie is going to be euphoric and uplifting. I put in parentheses kind of creativity, and then overall a nice alertness. I will say for myself personally, I do agree with all this. Definitely, I'm smoking a bowl. I usually smoke a bowl of the strain that I'm featuring in the episode as I record it, just so I can have a fresh tell of what I'm experiencing, just so I'm key and not just going off of memory, even though I can do that for the most part. Ultimately, I will say if I smoke enough of this, I found myself falling asleep the other day, and that's going to be the myrcene at the end of the day. It might affect you all differently. I don't know. Everybody's endocannabinoid system's a little different, but for me personally, if I smoke enough of this, it makes me so head high to the point where it makes me sleepy. It can help with insomnia even. Fun fact. Expected medical benefits you can look at when smoking some Maui Wowie is anxiety and depression relief and overall calming. And then, like I said, for me personally, if your endocannabinoid system might work more so I should say the same way that mine does with the terpenes, then you should get some insomnia help out of this as well. And we are here at our very last segment of the cannabis education, and that is our lineage breakdown. Guess what? No information for you guys. When I was doing research, they just Landrace strain and that's it. They don't have any specifics. Nobody has really known. If you think you know, or you think you could, find something to help add it to my informational memory banks, by all means, hit me up, show me it. I looked around, I looked, and there was nothing. So that's going to do it for our cannabis education section, guys. Let's head on over and get our balls busted by Nintendo Core Greats Horse the Band. Horse, the band, was founded and first came on the scene in 1998 out of Lake Forest, California. Currently an operating band, they have had quite the sporadic career, having a self-released debut album with their original vocalist, who was a gentleman by the name Adam Crook, in 2001. Adam left after the release, with the spot being filled pretty quickly by the bassist at that time, who would also continue to be the vocalist throughout the band's career from that point, is Nathan Witteke. A genre for these guys you can expect is metal/synthcore, with sound stylings along the lines of 8-bit. When taking a peek at an original lineup for these guys, as I had mentioned, Adam Crook was their vocalist, and then we have David Eisen as guitars and backing vocals, Eric Engstrom as keyboard, synth, backing vocals, guitar from the year 2001 to 2002, and then other random sampling and DJ type things. Jason Roberts on bass, and Jason Caruza on drum. Now, when looking to the most current lineup, or the one as to date, we're going to see Nathan Witteke as lead vocalist, and he did bass as well from 2001 to 2002, and also on drums from 2000 to 2001. Next, we still see David Eisen on guitars, backing vocals, and then we still see Eric Engstrom doing his thing on keyboard, synth, and all the goodies. And then we have Jeremiah Bignell on bass and Daniel Poiliot on drums, and he also played bass in 2004 for a bit. If you guys didn't catch it, the guitarist David and keyboardist Eric, they were there in the beginning of the band and still there now. They actually were the ones who had founded and constructed Horse the band. They did this essentially after they had met while attending El Toro High School. And yes, I'm talking about that El Toro for all you shredders out there just like myself. Horse the band had many changes within their lineup throughout the years. I won't go into a lot of it really, but they pretty much had one if not two member changes per album. They had a lot of talent and a lot of different minds coming in and out, and I think you could really see that as time goes on. The band's first official record label debut was their album Our Borlax back in 2003, and that was via Pluto Records. Coincidentally, talking about that first release, that's going to bring us to our discography breakdown. Previously mentioned in the podcast, I talked about a self-release that they did. I will throw that in here, but I am not going to throw it into my analyzation and breakdown of the albums. I did listen to it. It's very interesting, so if you guys want, I'll link it in the comments down below in the description. That first unofficial release was called Secret Rhythm of the Universe, and that was a demo in 2001. And then we see Our Borlax official release coming out in 2003. And then 2 short years later, we see their album The Mechanical Hand. Following not too long after, only a year, we see Pizza EP. And I will tell you guys a fun little story about that when we get to the interesting facts section. After Pizza EP, we can see their next full-length a year later in 2007 being A Natural Death, and rounding out their catalog in 2009, their last album, Desperate Living. Coming off of that last album, that's going to bring us to our discography analysis. Let's get into it. First and foremost in the rankings, I am going to throw to you guys The Mechanical Hand, their second CD. Reason being for me is that when listening to this album, the guitar tones are one thing that really just stick out. They are just very in your face as far as the distortion when you hear that chug when he does breakdowns or he plays palm muted. But then when you hear him doing riffing across all the strings or some kind of tremolo picking or even playing screechier or more panicky chords up higher on the strings, you know, it just sounds so clean and clear and not over squeaky or over glassy. And I know at the time, for all you guitar techs and nerds who are listening, I'm more than positive his setup at the time, he was running orange amps, not specific to the model, but I know he was playing Parker Fly guitars. I know this because at the time of The Mechanical Hand coming out, they had a music video for the song Lord Gold Throne Room, and in that he is playing that same guitar. And now Parker's, a little bit about them, are for the most part kind of more expensive guitars. They're kind of more boutique guitars, harder to find. I personally have only seen one with my own physical eyes and have touched one, and that was years and years ago in my mid-20s. And even that one used was about $850 or so, I believe, before the taxes. So if you're looking to have music is pay what you get for, so if you want to shell it out, then you're going to get the quality product. But, I'm poor and I am not going to shell that out. Continuing on with this album, in addition to the tones behind the guitar even. So as I had mentioned, there's probably about 1 or 2 member changes per album, and I personally think that the drummer, and this is another big reason I put this in first place, is that the drums on this album, and not that the drummers and the drumming on the other 2 albums after this and the EP weren't great. This album, just for how inventive the guitar parts are and how technical they can be, the drums are just doing, I can imagine such more simple things in my head, even though that's just me. I probably even when it still goes simple, but I guess I just don't think in my head of the necessary beats and the things that this drummer plays when playing these songs. But that's always been very captivating to me about this album, was the drums. And there's actually even a song on this album called A Million Exploding Suns. It's the second track, and I will play a little bit of some polyrhythm shit that the drummer does right here. Different timing between the cymbal hits, the snare hits, and the double pedal. It's insane, so check it out, guys. Along with that, one thing I also give high praise to with this album is this is their second longest album, being 13 songs, and I think their longest is A Natural Death with 16 songs. And A Natural Death with being 16 songs is about only 10 minutes longer than this album. And so for this being such a long album, pretty much not that far off from A Natural Death, I just feel every song is so unique. It always has you sitting on the edge of your seat listening. Songs like, the opener Birdo is such a strong one. I remember that when that came out, I saw the music video for it, and it was such a goofy one. But then you have really odd time breakdowns in songs like Manatee and The House of Boo. Actually, let me play you. I want to talk about a little bit of a part in House of Boo where you hear some. So for you video gamers out there who are fans of the Mario series, the music that plays in the actual House of Boo, Eric performs in this song with, his MIDI and his synth. So I'm going to throw that in here so you guys can get a little taste of that.
I'll call it alone, pick up the phone, but I feel that it's been disconnected now.
Big reason, again, guys, why this is number one. It's just there's not one song on this album when I put it on that I ever think of skipping. I will admit, when I first started listening to this album, songs like Softer Sounds, Octopus on Fire, A Rusty Glove, those kind of took a bit to grow on me. But man, you really just listen to this album through, I guarantee you guys are going to feel the same way. You're just going to be kept on the edge of your seat. Nathan's vocals at this time, I feel, not that he wasn't a strong vocalist throughout, and I really do love the really screechy, almost grindy stuff, like early number 12 stuff that he does on their first album, Arborlax. But this album, I just feel they were still really young. His screams were so perfect, but the way he would kind of sing was always goofy. And this album just has it all, guys. There's some kind of funky, dancey, like get down parts, but then there's some straight up jams that are instrumentals like Soaring Quails and Heroes Die, and those are so different in themselves. Hero Die's a little bit more straight up, kind of just gives you more of like a headbanging feeling that you can find that metronome to, but then Soaring Quails is like this more of an anthem type thing, and you got cool keyboards going on, and eventually it fades into Taken by Vultures, and I'll actually give you guys a little bit of Soaring Quails here as well. All in all, yeah, guys, this album has everything from the production, the guitar parts, the drummer, vocals, even the bass has some specific spots on this album where it shines and it really pops out. Even from the length, the opening, and the ending track, just fantastic. There's 10 out of 10. You can't go wrong with this album. Try to find one thing wrong with this album. I dare you. Just as a little side note, I kind of clumped Pizza EP in with this one for the most part just because it was a quick predecessor and they were pretty much on tour for the Mechanical Hand with a couple bands that I'll actually mention later in our interesting facts section about this EP. The writing kind of resembles that of which, and maybe pre-shadows a little bit of what's to come on A Natural Death, but it was overall, even in itself, a very unique release in itself. It's a good one, and you should listen to these two back to back. Also, Pizza EP has a Ninja Turtles, the theme song, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles theme song. They did a cover of it. It's pretty cool. Bringing us to the second in our breakdown, I'm actually going to throw that to the following record after Mechanical Hand, A Natural Death. A Natural Death I'm throwing second because the production on this was very good still, and I did like it more than the last album, Desperate Living. I can't put it before the Mechanical Hand only because the guitar tones I did like still, and it seems like when he went into these last two albums from the Mechanical Hand, it more so focused on the bass side of the tones and the punchiness behind that. And I feel, not that obviously it's very clear sounding, the guitars still, and you can very much hear what's going on, but I just feel it's not as clear for the higher played parts, or, you know, when he's playing more octave chords or shriekier chords, and maybe that's just me, but that's what I hear. They just seem a little bit more muffled than they could be brightened up. As I had mentioned about this album when talking about Mechanical Hand, this is their longest album, being 16 songs. I do like pretty much most of this album, but there are definite songs that I can usually skip just because at the end of the day they're not, like Treasure Train I'm not super huge on. Sex Raptor was okay. New York City was a little bit cookie cutter for my style, but I dig overall the kind of dancey synthy you get from New York City sometimes. As far as bangers on this album, the first, honestly, opening 5 songs are really good. You got Murder thrown in the top 5, Face of Bear, Hyperborea, just to name those 3 off the bat. But, you know, then you got cool kind of goofy songs like Kangarooster Medals later on. That's just kind of happy, and you can tell they were kind of being goofy about it. But it still kind of captivates you and makes you snap your fingers from time to time. You know, I'll actually include a little clip here for you guys. Check it out.
On a warm summer day, you'll find him there, relaxing in the shadows, tapping his toe under a tree down in Kangarooster Meadows.
Another thing about this album was they definitely got a bit more experimental, and they've always been an experimental band and always kind of had clean parts here and there, or not as heavy parts and more just kind of all over the spectrum. Like I said, they got dancey stuff, sometimes jazzy, waltzy, whatever it is. On this album, I just feel like even though they were more experimental, it wasn't as captivating. I feel like it was a bit more cookie cutter when it came to that experimentation. It sounded like more poppy-ish, if that makes sense. And that's kind of why I throw it in second and not first, because I just personally don't think the poppiness is appealing. Say what you want.
Put up your...
Ultimately, that's pretty much all I'm going to have to say about this album. Nothing too crazy. Face of Bear, I know I mentioned it, but you know what? I'm going to throw in a little track here for you guys because this is probably my favorite off the album. Take a listen. going for third in this analysis, I'm going to throw that to our Borlax. And you all might think I'm crazy, but for me, especially for a first effort, I think it was very well approached. And for a band of this stature and at the time and this kind of music, they just didn't care. And you could tell that they were just throwing all their balls into it. And it shows, man, because you got songs on here like Cuts Man, In the Wake of the Bunt, with a cool synthy intro in here. I'll throw a little bit of that to you guys right here. But then a couple songs later, you got Bunnies, Purple, and even the closing tracks on this album, Pole's Voice and Big Blue Violence, which if any of you Toasters and Moshers out there are gamers as well, you're going to see all these references. And I'll actually play a little bit of the opening and maybe a little bit of the ending clip of Cuts Man, where they actually themselves used sound clips from the old Power Glove commercials from back in the day. So here, check that out.
What is that?
Fire from the gods.
I don't know.
Power Glove.
Jeez.
I love the Power Glove.
The guitar parts in this are so inventive and sometimes a little bit more almost on like a grindier side with how chaotic and noisy it could be once in a while. And as I mentioned a little while ago with Nathan's vocals and how screech that, I personally just really love that kind of stuff, and that's why I'm a big fan of even the number 12's earlier stuff. I just really get it in for those screechy and high yelling vocals. But for me, that's a reason why I put it at 3, because I think his vocals, even though, again, first release, and it's so different, obviously, from the rest of the catalog, you still get a lot of that experimentation that flows throughout the rest of their career, and you see develop more so into the poppiness that it becomes as their career goes on. For me, really, the only negative aspects of this album I personally could think of is the production obviously isn't the best for being a first label release, and at the time, what was around as far as technology obviously was still, especially in the sense of recording stuff in the music biz, kind of building up on the technological aspect of it. So it still sounds good though, but yeah, the production obviously for that, I can't put it any higher than where it is. The final thing I'll say is the drums on this album. I just don't like the sound of them. I don't really think they're anything that great. Honestly, the kick drum almost sounds like a tin can, which is weird because usually that's a snare sound. But even the snare sound sounds like that a little bit. And so, I don't know, I just feel like the drums, and that's to each their own if that's how the drummer wanted to tune his drums at the time. You do you, man. I personally like a more compressed sounding drum kit and more of a little bit more of a thump, but with a, still a tacky kick behind it. And last but not least, I'm going to have Desperate Living. And now I feel like this might be a very, very unpopular opinion just because of, obviously, the production, the way the band went. But for me, I just feel like it was a more extended version of A Natural Death. And even though A Natural Death was good, I feel like the guitar tone got more into that, focused on the bass aspect, and got a little bit more muddy on that album. The drums are very good though. I do like the production and the sound of the drums. The drummer's drum kit sounds great. Not to disvalue the sound of the tones of the guitars, but mixed together with the production, I just feel like it could have had a bit more of a, not compressed necessarily punch, but something to give it a bit more of a mid or a slight high end to it, just to kind of kick that guitar or the higher sounds of the guitar up. Higher frequencies, that is. This one, though, I just felt the writing wasn't nearly as captivating, especially coming after A Natural Death. It seemed like they got even more into the experimental side, but kind of stayed poppy with it. But you do have some bangers on this album, like Shape Shift. I'll play you a little clip of that right here. overall, though, this CD is one that I find myself being able to skip a lot of the songs, and ultimately that's kind of why I had to put it at the bottom, because I also kind of factor that into these analyses, and not just by, again, this is not my biased opinion, so I just feel like even going from a general spectrum, there's a decent amount. I just personally think the back half of this album is the weaker part of this. Once you get up to Between the Trees, I feel like from Between the Trees, sorry guys, trying to collect all my thoughts and spin them out. From Between the Trees and then sandwiched in between the last track, Arrive, there's 4 songs, and I just think those 4 aren't very strong songs. They're not very captivating. They're very just straight poppy, I feel, for the most part, and straightforward, and that's just not appealing, I feel like, for the most part. And again, it's hard for me to give any kind of criticism or make any analysis for any of these bands that I do, because I love all these bands and I love all the music that they produce. I'm just trying to be as thorough as I can and use more so of a musical standpoint, more of a, the musician side, and not me as a listener listening to it. So there you have it, guys. That's pretty much going to wrap it up for this breakdown analysis. Seeing as we've smoked this spliff down to the roach, let's get into some interesting facts. First one I have for you guys is that the drummer John Carroll of the number 12 Looks Like You, and I might have even mentioned this back when I did the episode on them, but he played drums on Horse the Band's Earth tour when their drummer at that current time had just left abruptly right before that tour. He said, "I'm out," and luckily John Carroll was able to come to the rescue. Now let me toss some fresh pizza pie your way with that Pizza EPT. So the band themselves were on a tour in 2006 with bands Gatsby's American Dream, which is a fantastic band, and Portugal the Man, which is also another fantastic band, but I kind of fell off listening to them. That's besides the point. Let's get back to it. They were on tour with these guys in 2006, and they were at a stop or an off day here in Chicago, actually, and they decided after having Lou Malnati's pizza that they had to stop and go home. And from a statement made on the band's MySpace page, and this is verbatim, guys, this is the quote from the page, from what these dudes said. They say, and I quote, "We left that tour because we ate really, really, really good pizza at Lou Malnati's in Chicago with David's grandparents. The pizza was such that we were inspired by God to write music of the kind not heard in this world since Mozart was fed his first currywurst." Like, dude, y'all gotta be some weird-ass motherfuckers to just do that kind of shit, you know what I'm saying? But they're Horse the Band, and nobody's gonna question them because they're Horse the Band, and they can do whatever the fuck they want. Last little tidbit of interesting stuff for you guys is that the band has a couple DVD releases that you could try to find out there, one of them being the Earth Tour, and they, on that, essentially played 47 countries in the span of 90 days, and that was all done DIY, booked themselves, expenses themselves, no fucks given. You can actually go to Horse the Band's website, and they just have the torrent there ready to be downloaded for Earth Tour, and that's how I've been able to watch it in the past. It's been a while. Maybe I'll go back and watch it now that I'm thinking about it, get really stoned. But yeah, that's something I would definitely check out. I'll do my best to remember and put it in the show notes for this episode so you guys could just click on it there. You don't have to do the work yourself. Ooh, yeah. Looking towards our riffs of the week. That's right, I said riffs. I'm going to give you 2 this week. First riff of the week is going to be brought to you from their second album, The Mechanical Hand, and I'm going to give that to you from the song Taken by Vultures. Last riff I'm going to feed you guys is going to be from their song The Red Tornado off of that third album, A Natural Death. Check it out. having all that aggression worked out of our system, Toasters and Moshers, let's grab those chillums and hit our chill 'em out section. This week's chill 'em out, I've picked for you guys a lovely song by the name of Fleus, and that is from the Japanese ambient new age environmental artist Yoshio Ojima. And this song was released off of his CD Une Collection des Shonons 1, and that was released in 2019. Well, Toasters and Moshers, that's going to do it for us for another episode of the Riffs and Spliffs podcast. As always, I want to thank all the Toasters and Moshers whose ears this is falling upon, and it means the world to me. If you want to check the show notes in the description down below, I will make sure to link you all my social media so you guys can keep up with all the happenings here at the Riffs and Spliffs podcast. And with that being said, as always, stay toasty, my friends.